Hello guys, Alan here and welcome to the most authoritative Revit tutorial channel you can ever find on YouTube. And in this section we are going to take off from wherever we left off in part 1 of our Railing and Revit series. So I'm not going to waste much time in here. Now if you're watching this video and you haven't liked or subscribed to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel because you do not want to miss out on the tutorials I'll be dropping on YouTube. So please make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. It's going to help me out a lot for people to be able to learn everything we have inside of Revit. So just make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. If you have any comments you want to add to whatever we are doing here, you can put that in the comment section and I'll do well to respond to each and every one of you guys. So we are going to take off from wherever we left off in our previous part, but in this part I'm going to be talking more about the rail structure and then the baluster placement and also the handrail supports. I'm going to be very quick with this, so I want you guys to just sit back and follow along with every step in the way. Now I told you guys with the rail structure, so let me just click on this railing in there, head into the edit type, put this on the side right here. Now I did tell you guys in the previous part, which was the part 1, that with the rail structure we have in here, it's always going to be the horizontal element. All right, the horizontal elements coming in between here. Now you notice on this 900 pipe we have some horizontal elements in there which forms the rail structure. So when I click on this edit type for this railing, you notice we do not have any rail structure in there. Now when you head into this dialog, we do not have that rail structure, but when you get into this preview, I usually like to get a preview of what we are doing in here. So now when you head into the preview in there, you're going to notice we don't have anything for our rail structure in there. So we can decide to insert some in there. So I'm going to insert a new railing structure in there, and we can call this rail 1. We can call this rail 1 in there. All right, with the height I'm going to give this a 200 and with the offset I'm going to be talking about later on, and with the profile we have just this normal profile. C25 is a steel profile. I'm not going to use any of that. Now I should have loaded in a profile in there, but I'm going to use any of this to actually explain what we have in here. So I'm going to start off with the let me just use the elliptical handrail 40 by 30, and you can make sure you add a material in there. So let's just set a material. Let's add a material to make it a little bit interesting in there. Let's get that wood material in there. Let's load that in, use render appearance, hit on apply, hit on OK in there. So we have our material loaded in there. Now you'll notice it's not having any change in our preview tab. All right, that is because we haven't hit on our apply button in here. So after hitting on the apply, you're going to notice we have that railing structure in there. All right, so we can decide to insert more railing structures in there. So we can get in there and then add one more railing structure. So I'm going to rename this and probably call this a rail 2. I'm going to call this rail 2, and with the height is going to be the height coming all the way from the bottom going up. So I'm going to give this about 500, and with the profile I'm going to change that and use the rectangular handrail 50 mm by 50 mm, and also with this I'm going to use the same beige material. All right, so you guys can decide to add a different material to it, or if you have a custom material you want to use, you can add that in there. And when we hit on apply, you're going to notice we can now see that material in there for this railing we have in here. Now with the offset, all right, so let me just pan around a little bit for you guys. So now with the offset, okay, this view is better. So now with the offset in there, if I should put in here 100 mm and then I hit on apply, you're going to notice this railing structure is going to offset 500 mm away from this balusters we have in here. All right, So most of you are not going to do that. We are going to make sure we have everything at 0 in there, and we can keep it at 0 in there, which is perfect. So now if we have a railing structure in there and we want to use the same railing structure to go up, we can actually duplicate that in there, and then we can just make sure we change that height in there. Let's just call this 700. Hit on apply, hit on OK in there, and we have that railing structure in there. So hit on apply, hit on OK in there, and you notice it's changed inside of this railing in there. So when I head in here, just turn this and head into the realistic tab in there, you're going to notice our railing structure has now 900, was it a 900 mm? Our 900 mm railing has now some rail structures in there, which is kind of perfect in there. So this is how we actually work with the rail structure. So you can decide to add in some rail structure in there to kind of add some more detail to your railing in there. Now I'm going to move on to talk about the baluster placement in there. All right, so I'm going to use the next family kind of stairs. So I'm going to use this one. So I'm going to click on that 1100 mm railing in there. Head into the edit type section, and when you head into the edit type, you have to go straight into the baluster placement. Now when we head into the baluster placement, I think I said in the previous part that this is where all the magic happens. All right, so we have the main pattern, and then we also have the post. All right, so it's divided into two parts in there. We have the main pattern and also the post in there. So with the main pattern is going to be the elements we have in here, from this element all the way to this element. All right, from this second to last element in here to this second element in here. So that is where we are going to have our main pattern in there. And then we have the post. We have the start post. When you read in here, we have the start post, the corner post, and then the end post in there. So with the start post is this first post you see in here, and then with the corner post we have in there is we can't see our corner post in here because our railing is not having a corner. So if we were to be drawing a railing going straight and then we curve in a corner, it's going to put that corner post in that corner we are going to have when we create that railing. So that's a little bit interesting. Now we have the end post, which is this end railing in here, So I'm going to talk about what's happening in here in our main pattern. So with the main pattern, we can decide, let me just extend that a little bit and just open this up. All right, so this is perfect. So now with the main pattern, we have the regular baluster placed in, which is this part. This balusters, like I said, there's this post to this post in there. Nothing is going to affect this post and then this element in here. So nothing is going to affect this last post and then the first post. So it's just going to be the regular balusters in between those posts in there. All right, so this is where we're going to work with all of those items in there. So we have that regular baluster in there, and it comes as a family. So you can decide to change that family in there. So we can change that to an M glazed 800 mm, which is going to serve as a glass railing in there. And we have the baluster round 25 mm. So you can decide to put in any kind of railing in there. So I'm going to use this in there. And now with the base, okay, let me just change that and use, let me just stick with the round one. So with the based parameter we have in here, you are mostly going to have this set on host. Now we don't want our railing to have a top rail element. We definitely want to make sure all of our railings are set to the host, so we can host that on a stringer, on a thread, or on a topo surface, or even on the floor. So we're going to want to make sure we keep that on host. And with the base offset, you are just going to offset this balusters from the base. All right, so let me put in here 100 mm, and you're going to notice what happens. It offsets 100 mm away from the floor in there, which is that base offset in there. So with this there, I want to keep everything at 0, hit on apply. And with our top rail, we want everything to always be attached to this top rail element. All right, we do not want it to be a hosted family. We want it to always go and attach to a top rail element, which is this element in here. So we definitely want to go and check the host in there. And also with the top offset, we can offset those balusters away from the top rail. All right, so we can give it about 100 mm as I usually do. So, and it offsets 100 mm away from this top rail in there. Now if I should put in a negative 100 in there, hit on apply, it's going to tell me the top reference is below bottom reference for one or more balusters. These balusters cannot be created, so you should have that in mind in there. It can't go above that, so we are going to keep that at 0 in there. Hit on apply and bring that back in there with our top offset. Always keep that at 0 in there. Now have the distance from previous, which is going to be the distance in between them, so you can make sure you check that. We can put this at 200, and you're going to notice we have some spaces in between them now. It's quite enlarged in there, and we also have our offset also in there, which is quite perfect. Now when you move to the justify, we can set this to spread pattern to fit in there, or we can use the center. So I usually like to keep my spread pattern to fit in there, so it's going to fit in that space with the same pattern and the same spaces in between that baluster distance from previous in there. All right, so now when you head into the post section, we have the start post, and we always, which is the first post we have in here, and we always want to have that at we always want to keep that at we want to have a family for that. We can choose to decide to keep a family, add a family to that, and with the base we want it to be a hosted family. With the base offset, we are not going to offset those, we are not going to offset that start post or any corner post in there. So it's basically the same rule that applies to the main offset in there, but in here we have the space in there, which this is set to 12.5 in there, which is going to just be spacing those it's going to space those the post away from this baluster railings we have in there. All right, so this is just going to be the spacing for that, and we have the offset also in here as well. So we can hit on apply, hit on OK in there, and then hit on apply and hit on OK in there, and then we have this railing created in our space in there. So we have that also in here as well. Now if I should draw a stairs, all right, if I should draw a staircase in here, so let me head it back into level 1, and let me just get a railing and just make sure I use, all right, so get back and let me just draw a stair. Let me just use the industrial assembly and just draw one straight flight in there. So with the railing, it's going to be on the threads, and I'm going to use the I'm going to use that 900 mm thread in there, and then I'm just going to finish that out of the way. All right, so this is perfect. So we have this stair in our design in here, so we have just this single flight going all the way up with this railing, the 900 mm, which is this railing in here. So I'm going to talk about the handrail supports in there. So we can just click on that railing and then head into edit type, and when you head into the edit type, all right, we have there, so we are done talking about the construction, which is the baluster placement, the rail structure, and we are going to talk about the top rail, and we have the handrail in there. So I'm going to talk about the handrail supports in there. So with the used top rail is always this top element in there, which you have in there, the circular 400 mm. You can decide to change that by clicking on the 3 dots beside that to also change that family in there. So I'm going to cancel that out of the way, and I'm going to talk about the handrail 1. All right, so with the handrail, you notice we have nothing assigned to that parameter, so I can just click right there on these 3 dots in there, and then we have the pipe wall mount, and then we have the rectangular wall mount. So I'm going to use the pipe wall mount for now for this tutorial, and we are going to talk about the construction. All right, we're going to head into all of these several parameters we have in here. So with the construction parameter, you notice with the default join, we have the meter in there. All right, most of you are not going to understand what that is. We have the meter and the fillet. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate what those mean in the video. So I'm going to demonstrate that, and we have our hand clearance in there, which is 40 mm. So it's just going to be a clearance from our hand in there. So let me just finish that out of the way. And with the position, we don't have any position assigned to that, so we can decide to keep that on the left. Hit on apply, hit on OK in there. Now you're going to notice on our 900 mm, let me just change this. Right, so let me just use this. Let me just use the one on the floor in here. All right. Okay, so this is perfect. Let me turn to an advantage. All right, so this is perfect in there. All right, so you notice we have an extra handrail in between that 900 mm handrail in there. Because of that, our handrail support we had in there. Let me change this back to hidden line. Now, something seems to be wrong with this handrail. First of all, is the spacing in there, which is our hand clearance. All right, so I'm going to click on that railing, head into edit type, and I'm going to extend this a little bit, and I'm going to move all the way to my handrail 1, and I'm going to click back in there, head back into that support in there. Okay, so let me just cancel that and just make sure I change this to a 3D view and just twist that a little bit. Okay, so this is perfect. And before I get into that type properties in there, and so this is where we're going to find our hand clearance in there. So we can decide to make that just 100 mm, and with the height, I think we can change the height if you want, but I think I'm fine with the height. With the profile, I'm also fine with that. Now with the transition, I always like to keep that at simple. You can decide to choose the goose neck or none, so I always like to keep that at simple. And we can add a material to that. I'm going to select my birch wood material as I usually do and hit on apply in there. Now you notice our railing has 100 mm spacing in between there, so we can decide to make that let's just keep that at 900. Hit on apply, and this is fine. Oh, I think I did that with the height, so let's just keep the height at 900, and let's take this all the way to 800 in there. Okay, so you notice with our hand clearance we have 800 mm, which is way overboard, so we're going to change that to 70. And you notice we have that spacing in between that railing in there, which is perfect. And when you get into this tab we have in here, so we have the extensions. All right, so we have the extensions beginning at the bottom and also extension at the end top. So let me just finish that and show you guys what that is. All right, hit on apply in there. So let me head into my stair area. Let me head into my staircase. So we have that 70 mm clearance in there. So I'm going to talk about that handrail extensions in there. All right, so let me just keep this on this side and then just click on the railing, head into edit type, and I'm going to move this to this side. All right, so I'm going to go back into my handrail support in there and click on that. And when you head down into the extension beginning button in there, we have the extension style in there. We have several styles. We have, I think, from the floor, from wall. So we have from wall. So with the extension style, we have from wall. So now when I choose from the floor, all right, so when I hit on apply, you're going to notice hit on OK in there. Okay, so let me just give it a height. Okay, so when you choose from floor, just add some length in there. So I want 100 mm, and then when you hit on apply, you're going to notice we have that railing going all the way, the handrail support going all the way to the floor in there. All right, so if I should change that and then use that for a post, it's going to curve that into that post in there. All right, so it's going to be supported into the newer post. Now you remember, guys, in our baluster placement we had the start post, the end post, and the corner post. So this is where all those magic are going to be attached in there. So we can decide to change that to a post, and we can decide to change that to the wall, and you can see it makes sense to actually change that to attach to the wall in there. All right, so this is perfect. And with the extension end top, is going to be at the top of our staircase. All right, so this is going to be at the other top in there, and with the beginning button is going to start in here. So we don't have, you notice we are not going to have any of this extension style on the top of our staircase in there. So that is what it means. And with the beginning top termination, now let me just change this to floor so you guys get what that is. So let me just change this to the floor, and with the terminations in there, when I change this to a wood in there, you're going to notice we have some little anchored supports, which is going to actually hold this all the way onto the ground, like 7 as a support in there. And with the end top termination in there, you can also change that in there. I like to keep that at none as well in there. And with our supports in there, we have the layout, which is a fixed distance of spacing, which is 1200 in there. You can change that with the justification. You can keep that at begin in there. So I'm going to keep that at begin so you guys see what we have in there. So you can see it starts with a begin in there, and I can put that at center in there, and we have that support also at the center. All right, you notice this is now at the center. If I put this at the end and I hit on apply, it's going to be at the end in there. All right, you can see that. So I'm going to keep that at center in there, and we have the identity data. All right, so you can put in some information you need in there. All right, so this is perfect. Though this is all you need to know about the handrail supports we have in there. With the handrail supports we have in there, so I'm going to click on OK, hit on apply, and then hit on OK in there. Now you're going to notice with our handrail support something seems to be wrong. They do not follow along with this balusters in there. All right, they seem to be in the center. So what you can do, there's one way you can solve that. I think I learned that from Balkan Architect, like I always say. So Balkan Architect kind of like explained how we can actually place those balusters in there, how we can align that to also fit this support to also be attached to this balusters in there. So what you can do is you can click on this stair, head into the edit type, and then you can get into the rail structure in there. And when you head into that rail structure, so you're going to see we have a height, some different types of rail structure in there. So I'm not going to talk about any of this. I'm going to go back into the baluster placement, and when I head into the baluster placement in there, we have the distance from previous. All right, the distance from previous, you can see, is set to 1000 millimeters in there. So I can just hit on apply, hit on OK in there, and just hit on OK as well, and then get back in there, get into my handrail, and I can click in there, and then with the hand clearance and with the length, we have that 1000 in there. So with a fixed distance in there, I'm going to choose a maximum spacing, and I'm going to keep that at 1000 So this at times is not usually going to work like what Balkan Architect said. It's usually not going to work. You would have to basically do it manually in there. So I'm going to hit on apply, hit on OK, and how you can actually change that manually, all right, is for you to, what you can do is you can just get in there and you can hit on your tab key to make sure you select that support in there, and then you can unpin that, and then you can move that to actually the kind of support you want it to be on. So you can move it to fit on that support in there, and with the hand clearance you can also change that in here as well. Keep it at 100 in there, and when you head into the edit type, you can also change those height, and then also you can change the radius in there as well, radius 2 and radius 1 in there as well. So you can do that manually by yourself by moving all those elements to where they are supposed to be in there. So you now have to unpin every single one of them. So what Balkan Architect said was that you can actually select everything, you can filter everything out, make sure you check none, and you're not going to check stair supports. Make sure you check railing supports, hit on apply, hit on OK. And when you select all those railing supports, you can head into your modify tab and then select the unpin, and then it's going to unpin every single one of them. So what you just have to do now is just hit on the tab key, select that. You don't have to unpin that, and you can move that to each and every baluster placement in there and fixed that by yourself in there. So this is how that works for this railings we have in there. So I hope you guys have learned something. I'm going to move on to the next part, which is going to be our final part, where I'm going to be creating some stairs in that series. All right, in that part, I'm going to be creating some classical stair. I guess I'm going to create a classical stair and show you guys a trick on how you can actually use these stringers to actually create railings for your stairs inside of Revit. All right, so I'm going to show you guys how you can use that railings to create a stair, the stringers inside there to create some railings inside of your stairs. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. I'll catch you guys in the final part, which is the part 3 of our railings in Revit. Peace out. I'm still working real hard on a Saturday. A future I don't see from a mile away.